Hello and welcome, folks, to Chats in a Pickle, the podcast where I, Alan Ibrahim, and my co-host Magellan Fluke talk about non-struck work in the world of pop culture and media. Magellan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you here. You know, I had to bring on you as an expert. I feel like I can't talk about rolling dice and being a big tabletop nerd without consulting my literal best friend.
Hold on, I just gotta get my comically large D20 from the shelf behind me. So you're rolling persuasion right now?
Yeah, can I get a persuade roll?
Yeah. All right. That's a 15. Okay. You successfully persuade me to be on the rest of the podcast with you.
That was scary. I was intimidated. What if I failed that? I guess we're not going to reload the save and find out.
Yeah, right. Let's not save scum. Chats in a pickle.
Indeed. Did you eat? Oh, I have to ask, mandatory question. Did you eat any pickles this week?
Did I eat any pickles? I had some sliced pickles on my burger at McDonald's today. So,
ooh, pickle check.
I did eat a small pickle yesterday. Yes, I ate a small pickle yesterday. I was at a going away party, and there were some light refreshments. And I had a small pickle with some hummus on it.
Oh, good combo.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Speaking of hummus, I just threw out some baba ganoush today. Baba ganoush and hummus, both similar Middle Eastern dips. I felt really bad, but I don't eat a lot of baba ganoush. It's not my favorite. I don't like eggplant, but my mom made a bunch of it, and I ate some of it, and with cucumbers, which are kind of junior pickles or pre-pickles. Try saying pre-pickles 3 times fast, please.
Prequels, yeah, prequels.
Prequels, exactly. Oh, what are your favorite types of pickles and or Star Wars trilogy? The prequels.
We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about something we can talk about instead.
No, we cannot. We must talk about something completely different.
We're going to talk about a different now trilogy. Huh? Now it's a trilogy. It just took them a little while, right? Jeez, what are we doing this whole time?
Anyways. This is your pickle today, this week. So introduce your pickle to us.
Okay, I will. I just re-listened to last week's episode where you had to edit yourself in correcting us.
Did you like
what
it?
It is we're doing. Yeah, it's pretty funny. I like you fading off in the background, having to continue to correct us. Anyway, so we were thinking Baldur's Gate 3 is out. Okay, let's, go revisit Baldur's Gate 2, which we played a little bit back in the day, and see, does it hold up? Can we pick up that story where we left it off? And then who can find save files these days? Who wants to jump 16 hours into something that they played a decade ago or whatever? So we just played the new thing, Baldur's Gate 3, and we're going to talk about it. It was developed by Larian Studios, developers of the Divinity games. Yes. So not BioWare, who created the original Baldur's Gate games, because BioWare is doing other things these days. But it is, even if it is not necessarily a direct sequel narratively to those original Baldur's Gate games, it's made by a company that has been making games in this vein, and it is definitely in the world of those Baldur's Gate games. There's some characters that might show up from those games. It is very much a part of that series in spirit, in reality. And it's the hot game right now. Everybody's playing it and talking about it, and so we're going to do it too. So yeah. Alan, anything you want to add just in terms of your experience with Baldur's Gate? Or I know you're also a big Planescape fan, so like CRPGs or just old school action RPGs. Where are you at with your history on those things?
Right. So we actually had another listener, I think it was Emrys, who said like we were talking about like the history of games in the 90s on one of our Patreon shows, like best games of the 90s. And they were surprised that the list never mentioned Planescape Torment, which was for a long time like in contention for my favorite game, which is always funny when I tell that to people because I never left the first city in that game. It is notable for having a huge first city with tons of little side quests, and every single NPC has something to say. And so when I was younger, like not just getting into PC game, but getting into like mature PC gaming, I'd say around like 16 or 17 maybe, I would mess with Planescape and I would go through that first city a lot. And that came from this era of these sort of trilogy of CRPGs franchises that blew up in different ways. There was Planescape Torment, which eventually got a follow-up in 2014 with Planescape Tides of Numenera, which I played a little bit of. There is Icewind Dale, which is the combat-heavy D&D game franchise. And then there was Baldur's Gate, which is based in the, I believe, advanced D&D universe. All three of them, I believe, are advanced D&D. And there was the first two, and a lot of people at the time considered Baldur's Gate 2 to be one of the best written RPGs, video game RPGs of all time. So I played it. We played it, like you said, back in like 2014, 2015 on the remastered version, which is quite fun. Didn't get far enough to like have nuanced decisions of it, other than it was always just a little clunky. And it's super interesting to me, jumping forward now to 2023, that Baldur's Gate 3, which is, you know, setting records for sales and engagement, still maintains that slightly clunky spirit of Baldur's Gate and of CRPGs of old. I also mentioned quickly, I did play Divinity Original Sin 2, Larian's last major project, almost all the way through with a friend back in 2017. Really loved it. It is super duper combat heavy though. And so I was always like, man, if they just had like this, but way more story. And Divinity Original DOS 2 is so good, y'all. Like, if you don't want to play Baldur's Gate, you don't want the clunkiness of it, but you want something modern that's not BG3, definitely check out Original Sin 2. It's very good. But yeah, that's where I'm at coming into this experience.
Cool.
What about you?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of like isometric CRPG experience really, but I've always been a lover of the RPG genre. Famously, Knights of the Old Republic is my favorite video game of all time. And essentially, Knights of the Old Republic is a CRPG that you're just seeing from a third-person perspective, you could argue, because it's turn-based combat and it runs on a D20 system. It doesn't advertise that, but it is rolling D20s somewhere in its code. Like, I remember when I got that game as a kid and I'm looking in the manual and it's explaining like the, you know, essentially the third edition rules that it's running on. And I was like, what the heck is this? I don't understand this. Why is this manual so thick for the game with the blasters and the lightsabers? Right. Exactly. Feats. Constitution, wisdom. Yeah. Feats. Right. But so I love that game. So it's pretty deeply ingrained in me to love games like this. Also, Fallout New Vegas is one of my favorite games of all time.
Of course. You have good taste in games.
So thank you. And then, you know, there's other games that I've always wanted to play but never gotten around to in the genre, Mass Effect and Dragon Age and those kinds of things. So Baldur's Gate also kind of felt like this is a game that's, to start to say my opinions on it, this is a game that like scratched a lot of itches for me, because it gave me that feeling of being, I don't know how old I was when I played KOTOR, like 12 or 14, or I honestly can't remember. But that feeling of like, ooh, I'm going to chew on every single moment, and wow, this is so cool. I get to make choices, and oh, what I did has an impact on the world. And it also is kind of satisfying wanting to do that kind of game, but a modern version of it. So it's been really fun for me in that regard.
Yeah, and I guess last thing, just building up to 3, this game has been getting so much hype online. We're actually, we announced in the Discord, we're going to be trying to stream it after this podcast recording. Yeah. So if you're available Monday night, August 21st, then you watched it. Otherwise, you missed it. But the archive will obviously be on YouTube. We'll just toss it up there. Yeah, because neither of us have messed with co-op yet. Is that correct? Or did you get a chance to play any?
I did not play co-op, no.
So I think, and we'll double check this on the stream, I think co-op just works like it did in the old ones, where one of us is the host and the other person takes control of 2 of the players.
I watched the girlfriend reviews stream, and that looked like what it was.
Yeah, so you know, we jump into one or the other person's games and just play 2 of your characters, which is cool. Yeah. God, there's so many thoughts. There's been a lot of discourse about Baldur's Gate 3 and how like the role of this as a AAA game, how they got the D&D license, which cost them money. A lot of people think like, oh, they only got this much budget because they got the D&D license, and the truth is like, you pay for a license, you don't just get it and then get money. It's kind of complicated. And we're not games industry experts whatsoever, but there's also been talk of like, and I don't really want to get into this, but just like, why don't other games have this much polish? You know, why can't the other games be as bug-free as this? Which is funny considering this game is like a little janky.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was just this like IGN video that people keep talking about that's like, oh, this really made other developers scared because they can't do this much like polish. And it's like, first of all, this was in early access for about 5 years, I think.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
I remember it's been in my Steam wishlist for years, and I was like, I don't really care. Baldur's Gate, that's cool that it's like coming out, but I'm not going to play it in early access. And then it came out. So like, yeah, of course they had time to polish it.
Right. I've seen a lot of stuff on YouTube of people gleefully being like, other games developers are mad at how much game this is and how it's not charging any microtransactions or whatever. I haven't. It feels like people are kind of gleefully characterizing that in a way to dunk on the video game industry. And also it seems like people in the video game industry are saying some pretty dumb stuff about this game. So we can just kind of leave it at that. It's a really good game, and it seems like they went about this the right way and delivered a product that's pretty good. But I've seen people call it feature complete, which is such a weird phrase to use to describe
I just actually winced. Like...
feature complete. But I had a similar experience to you where I was at home in our hometown last week, or was it last week? 2 weeks ago? Last week? Week and a half ago. And my sister was like, oh yeah, I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3. And I was kind of like, it didn't even register to me that meant that it was out. It's like, oh yeah, that exists, right? Isn't that not that good or something? Or wasn't on my radar at all.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of interesting. But yeah, they definitely are having a better experience than Cyberpunk did. That's like, I keep thinking about Cyberpunk for some reason.
It's just like, if you, the thing you should be complaining about is not like, oh, why don't developers listen to consumers more, or why can't they stop being lazy? It's like, what if you had the time and the finances and the patience to make the game that you wanted, and your people financing you let you do that, and just be weird with it? That's how you get Baldur's Gate 3. Simple as that. Interestingly enough, I'm going to come back to this a lot, but I restarted a playthrough of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, your favorite game, to play alongside the A More Civilized Age podcast, who are also pivoting with regards to the WGA and SAG strikes to cover that instead of the TV stuff. And playing that game side by side with Baldur's Gate 3 really makes all of those complaints more interesting, because people are saying it's so feature complete, it's so dense, it's so full of stuff. And KOTOR is like, there are 3 NPCs in a town, and that is the city of Terrace. And you're like, that's adorable. And I hate to be contrarian, but I kind of like that about it. I like how focused KOTOR is. I know it's focused by necessity. They didn't have it's on, like, it's a PlayStation 2, or not PS2. It was like an Xbox and PC game from 2003. Like, they couldn't make the city bigger than that. It's a matte background for a reason. But I run around the first area of Baldur's Gate 3, which is where I think we both spent our time, in the Act 1 area. And I'm so overwhelmed. That was like my first thing when I got through the prologue, which just to set the stage, 120 years after Baldur's Gate 2 concludes, and there's a Baldur's Gate campaign as well that comes out. Your character awakens inside of a Mind Flayer ship, and they awake with their consciousness, but they have a Mind Flayer inside of their brain. And so after breaking out and escaping the ship, they find some other people in there who also have Mind Flayers in them. And they set about trying to cure themselves before the Mind Flayer takes over their brain and turns them into a Mind Flayer themselves. From there, it is entirely just your friend and you doing a D&D campaign where you go on quests, you meet some cultists, you flirt, you go back to a camp. It's very, I mean, you said Dragon Age earlier, like, go to campsite, go back to area, progress storyline.
Right,
like,
it has that same system, yeah.
It is just that, and it's super sharp about it, and it is so D&D, I think systems-wise, we can talk a lot about, like, the role of, like, dice in this game and how much it feels like they expedited, but also, like, kept in some of the annoying things about Dungeons & Dragons. I think maybe that's somewhere we should start. How did you feel about playing Baldur's Gate 3? Separate from, like, story or vibes, just, like, what did the gameplay feel like to you?
Well, I think the D&D-ness of it is an interesting thing to talk about, because it shows how much the cultural position of Dungeons & Dragons has changed in the last, like, 25 years or so since the original Baldur's Gate games came out. Because this game is like, hey, this is a Dungeons and Dragons game. Come play it. Like, look, these are all the classes from Dungeons and Dragons and the races from it. This is 5th edition, the current edition. We've brought in all the spells, there's all this kind of talk around the game of like, you can take your D&D character and play it here, or you could play a character in this game and transfer them to Dungeons and Dragons. And literally this game, when you do a skill check, rolls a 20-sided die on the screen in front of you, which is something that it just really made clear to me that is within the public consciousness now in a way that it hadn't been a couple decades ago, which I found fascinating. And on the one hand, like, it kind of is a double-edged sword for the accessibility of this game, I feel like, because on the one hand, it allows you to take this kind of like cultural understanding of D&D that you might have because it is more widely known. And then if you've experienced or played D&D and you know what the action economy of it is with the action, the standard action, the movement, and the bonus action or whatever, you know what a saving throw is, you know what skill checks are. This game is immediately legible to you. Mm-hmm. But then if you haven't played Dungeons and Dragons before, it's front loading all of these aspects that you're like, I don't quite understand what this is. And I don't know that the game does a good job of teaching you the rules of D&D, but the hyper visibility of its D&D-ness was something that was kind of striking to me. And it, like you're saying, gameplay wise, it felt like playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
More so than reminding me of, the only other thing it really reminded me of is in some of the battles. Like, I recently played a Fire Emblem game for Super Smash Echoes for an episode that's going to come out in a while. Mm-hmm. And it kind of had like some tactics game qualities to it in the fights a little bit.
Right.
But it felt like sitting around the table and playing Dungeons and Dragons. And I was thinking in the way that I would think in a D&D encounter or, you know, that kind of thing. So I enjoyed it for that reason, because it was something that I like had experience with and understood. But I was wondering what it would be like for somebody who didn't have that experience.
Yeah, and I'm curious too. I mean, probably 3 years ago or something, I was playing a D&D campaign with some friends from Discord over the internet, and I had a great time for a couple months, but we burned out mostly the classic reason people burn out on D&D campaigns, which is lack of interest and consistency with scheduling. And my recurring thought playing actual D&D was that there was too much goddamn combat. Because, and maybe this is a DM issue, maybe this is it's also a player issue. I think it's a combo. But like, it's hard to be engaged when somebody's only talking to you. This is also why some people use miniatures, or they prefer to just play D&D in person, is because it's way more engaging when you're like around a table rolling dice than like imagine playing Baldur's Gate 3 with your eyes closed. That is what playing D&D is actually kind of like. So Baldur's Gate, and this is like, again, pulled right out of how it was in the previous games, is just visualizing and doing the math for you. Which on one hand is very accessible, because like you said, like, you know, you walk forward and then like a big cartoon 20-sided die comes up, and it's like, okay, you want to do a persuasion check? You're going to watch it roll, which is very satisfying, and it feels very you know, immersive almost, I think is the word I'm looking for. It feels like, I'm sitting at a table watching the roll happen.
Which is kind of funny because it's like a meta textual thing. It's not happening in the game world, but you're right. The drama of it brings you into the moment more, which is so strange.
Verisimilitude is the word I was looking for. It brings a level of verisimilitude where you're like, I really feel like I'm not in a D&D world, but I'm playing D&D, if that makes sense.
Yes,
whereas
it does
I think
make sense to me.
BioWare went on to make games like KOTOR, where it doesn't feel like you're playing D&D. It feels like you're in in the Knights of the Old Republic tabletop universe. So like separating that's really interesting. But I agree, where it loses accessibility is like, if I'm playing D&D with people, they tell me when a roll is coming up. They tell me if I don't understand something, I can ask. There are like tutorial texts in the game, but like, I had this experience that's very emblematic of what I'm trying to get at, where I was walking around the goblin camp very early in the game, and I like fucked up like 5 different rolls, and I like took all my characters are like half health, and I was like, I'm just gonna walk around the goblin camp, and I just start seeing the dice roll thing happen over and over again in the corner of the screen, and I keep failing rolls that I don't even know are happening, and it's like, you failed perception, you failed to detect traps, you failed strength, you failed athletics. And my characters proceed to go on like a Looney Tunes journey, falling into a pit, getting hit by spikes, getting run over. And I'm like, fuck, what happened? What happened? I don't understand what I did. And like, if I was playing D&D, the person would be like, hey, careful, a thing is up ahead. Can you roll for it? And they would stop and be patient with me. and I felt like I was, swimming without a paddle. And then I found a frog, and I was like, oh, I have talked to animals. I'll talk to this frog. And the frog was like, fuck you, dude. It spits poison at me and wipes my party in 2 seconds. I was like, what the fuck happened? That's so funny. And that's so
God.
like random, but also it shows what I'm talking about, where you're like, I just don't know what happened. The system got ahead of me and I lost track of it. And that is my problem with the open world, is sometimes you're running and like 5 different roles are happening and you're like, why? What's going on? Am I losing? Am I dying? What did I fuck up? Okay, I just need to long rest now. I've ruined it. It's punitive. It's hard. It's so interesting that this game that's like blowing up online and everyone's playing it is like a kind of hard, kind of punitive D&D game.
Yes.
And maybe I'm bad.
Difficult. No, it's hard. It's a hard game. I had this experience where did you go into the like underground little dungeon place where you meet the guy who goes to your camp, Withers? Did you meet Withers?
No, I didn't meet Withers yet.
Okay.
I know who Withers is.
There's like a underground dungeon place that you can go to, and one way to enter into it is you can cleverly see that there's something suspended from rope that if you break the rope, it'll drop through the ground and open up a hole for you to go into. Yeah. And you're like, oh my God, I'm so smart. This is great. And you end up in a room that's like kind of in the middle of this dungeon, but it's right in the middle of where a bunch of enemies are. So that like the actual better way is to go in through the front door where you're not supposed to go, and pick them off one by one on your way through. But this way that seemingly is like, I'm so smart, I cracked a way in through the ground. I ended up in a room where it was an impossible fight. Like I couldn't win it. It was me and my wizard buddy Gale, and we were just 2 glass cannons who couldn't possibly beat these guys. And I had a lot of fun with that encounter, because what it taught me about the game is you can't win this game by coming straight at it and expecting to beat a bunch of enemies. You have to start to think about, what are the tools in my arsenal? How do they interact with each other? And I ended up like loading an earlier save and just not going that route because it wasn't possible for me to win. But I actually really enjoyed the like 30 minutes that I was banging my head against the wall, trying it and dying it, and understanding, oh, I could do a thing where I create a choke point in the door by putting grease on the floor, setting it on fire. And then Gale has a spell that makes it rain so he can extinguish the fire that's on me and him. And then when I actually went and did that encounter for real, I used all the little tricks and exploits that I had learned from my practice runs and actually killed those guys the way that I wanted to. So it's a hard game that sometimes is like cackling at you because there's a room with a bunch of traps and flamethrowers and it kills you in 3 seconds. And sometimes it's hard in a way where it's like, you're going to have to think of a smarter solution than what you're doing in order to win this, which I respect about it.
It doesn't want to hold your hand. It says you need to earn this, and you will find more satisfaction if you solve these things on your own, and we don't point you to things than if we were just like, here are markers on your map. I think that's like very popular in gaming today. It's like, don't hold the player's hand. Sometimes I'm like, I wish you told me where the party members were, so I had a tank earlier. But Liaison was not in the direction I went, so I went like 6 hours without a tank, and then I turned around to the first checkpoint of the game and was like, oh, she was around a corner. And it's like, that's exactly how Baldur's Gate 2 was. That's how it was. You could miss everyone. This is just how games were.
That first beach area was so annoying because I literally went up one route of it, and I must have missed, there's this one character, Shadowheart, where if you save her from a pod in the prologue ship thing, she's supposed to be there on the beach when you wake up as like your first official party member. And I must have walked straight past her or something.
She's missable.
And then I found Gale, and then I went and I did this whole dungeon that was like too hard for 2 level 2 people to do, but I made it through, and I figured it out by like hiding in rooms and throwing spells and then running back inside the room and closing the door. I closed a lot of doors to cut off people's sight lines from me. And then I went back and I took a slightly different route, and I ran into Asterion, and it's like, oh, what's up, man? And then I looked it up, and Lae'zel, like you said, was around the corner from where Gale was. And it's like, I could have had a full party going into this dungeon.
Yeah.
So that was a little annoying. And I honestly don't see the value in doing that, except that it gives people kind of, there's a little more emergent story, I guess, there, right? But that definitely is part of what the game is doing, is they're not signposting for you, hey, this is where this person is. Although they do signpost who is important, with a pretty interesting character creation option, that if you want to talk about the character creation options.
Yeah, I'm assuming you're talking about the genital slider. That was one of the questions we got in. I'm going to read a couple of them off later. But May Louise, by the way, asked, character generation spoilers, did either of you get jump scared by the genital slider?
I played this on the Steam Deck, and I gave it to a coworker of mine who's interested in the game. He pre-ordered it for PlayStation, so he's like sitting on his hands waiting for it to come out. And he's looking at it, and he's like, oh, did you see the genital slider in here? And I was like, what? Oh my God. And he's
Cyberpunk
like,
all over again.
Flipping through it. But Cyberpunk was like actually a slider, I think, from what I remember. And this is more like, okay.
Penis 1, penis 2, penis 3, vulva. You're like, I do like that it lets you easily be transgender. Like, that's just not even a big deal. It's fine.
Yes. Yeah.
But sorry, what are you talking about with regards to character creation?
Well, they let you choose to be one of the origin party members instead of a custom character. Which, had you ever seen that in RPG before? I don't think I've ever seen that before.
I don't think so either. I was gonna say I thought Baldur's Gate did, but BG2 did. But I tried a playthrough of it in preparation for this, and you super can't because. And you definitely can't in like Dragon Age or Mass Effect because your character is a person that exists.
Right.
But in this, you could play all of Baldur's Gate 3 as Astarion, as Shadowheart, and they just start, presumably, where they are in the game, or they go through that little prologue and then they wake up at wherever they start.
So I looked into this. Okay. But to finish the point that I was saying before, the game does an interesting thing where they show you, like, here are people who are important to the story. So when you meet them, you're like, oh, shoot, I remember you from the character creation screen. Will, you seem important. I'm going to talk to you when I find you later. Oh, you're a party member. Okay, cool. Well, I'm glad I made a point of seeking you out after I saw you do cool sword stuff or whatever. Anyway, and then they have this really fun thing in the character creator where you can just make those characters give a little monologue to give you some backstory on them.
It reminds me of like an MTV dating show. What's up? Yeah. My name's Shadowheart. I'm kind of gay. I think that the church is good. Anyways, deuces.
Yeah. I spent like the first 20 minutes of playing the game just watching all those little monologues. It was really, really fun.
They're very good. Yeah, I watched them as well.
Yeah, but if you pick one of those origin characters, you go through the prologue. And I was wondering, well, but if you play Lae'zel, you meet Lae'zel in the prologue. And what ends up happening is there's just this like Githyanki guy who drops down and he's like, Lae'zel, what's up? It's me, another Githyanki guy. And then he gets like killed off in the prologue before the main story starts. So he's there as a friend for the first bit.
Right.
But otherwise, if you're playing as one of those origin characters, they just don't appear where they would in the story because you're them.
Makes sense. That also explains a little bit of why they feel kind of haphazardly placed. Is like they're not even there for everybody. They're there for you because you played as you and I both played as custom characters, and I'm sure a large percentage of people are going to do that because that's a lot of fun.
What they recommend, I think, is play as a custom character.
Yeah, you can be whatever class you want. I don't think they have party members to cover every single class, so you can be whatever you want and start at level 1 and just play your person.
Yeah.
And it's more immersive. The only thing that's like kind of awkward is the game is very particular about who you are controlling and who matters. And I'm curious if we can mess around with this in the co-op, but like if I like to walk my tank ahead of everyone else so that if checks happen, they can get hurt by them. But then dialogue will suddenly happen and they become the person I'm controlling in dialogue. And I'm like, no, like I brought Lae'zel to these like people outside of a church, these like grave robbers, and one of the things I had was like intimidation Githyanki, and I was like, wait, who? Oh, I'm Lae'zel. Like, what's the fuck? That's not me. So now I just walk forward with my sorcerer person and hope that they don't get killed by things.
I think that's cool though. Like it's a expectation that you have to, untrain from experience with other RPGs that default to your protagonist being the speaker for the party. But it lets you, because really in Baldur's Gate, you are role playing as a D&D party. You're most strongly role playing as your protagonist character. But you could do a thing where it's like, oh, there's a locked chest over there. Let me use the person who is the best at lock picking or whatever as an example. Which I guess you can do in those other kinds of RPGs too, like KOTOR. You could do that as well. But this just kind of brings that to another level.
Right. And it makes it interesting then that, just quickly, that like your character also has a romance with other people that can, I guess, have them with each other. So everybody is in the D&D party, but you kind of have main character syndrome, but kind of not. Because everybody has the brain parasite. You're not like the special 1 in a million person who has it. Everyone has it. You're not special compared to anyone else here. Right. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, the only other, I want to hear about your character a little bit more and what you chose to do. But before I ask about that, the only other interesting character creation option is you can choose to play a character called the Dark Urge. And essentially what that does is it gives you a storyline where your character feels a dark urge to do evil, murderous things. And so it gives you new dialogue options where you can choose to either give into the urge or resist the urge, which is, I just think that's cool that from the jump, they give you like, it's not just, okay, I did my good playthrough, now I'm going to do my evil playthrough. It's like, okay, I did the normal playthrough, and now I'm going to do this playthrough where they've added a bunch of extra narrative elements to make that second playthrough more interesting. So it's really cool that they give you so many options. Like, I would love to go back and play KOTOR with either a different narrative twist or play KOTOR as Carthonasi and see like what that's all about.
Yeah.
So I just really liked that there's that many options.
Yeah, and the Dark Urge definitely has come from, I think, the long development time, like being able to, and this is one of the things I think they're going to be able to add with more like DLC or whatever, is different origins and different characters that you can build around. Because the Dark Urge leans more into the evil choices, but is not limited to them. So, like, you do not have to kill everyone.
Right.
But yeah, your ability to be evil, it's kind of like playing an evil playthrough of Undertale. Like, you're the same character, technically, without spoiling Undertale. But you have different urges. You have different, like, things pulling you. Because this is one of the big narrative concepts, is they're dealing with mind flayers. And that means that there is a thing in your head that tells you, hey, somebody else has one of me in their head. I can manipulate it. I can talk to it. I can also like twist its motivations and make it do what I tell it to, which is really cool because whenever I play D&D and I play a bard and I get like bardic persuasion or whatever, I don't think that's what it's called. I always feel weird about like the persuasive skills. And this is like a game where the key narrative conceit is that for some people, you can make them say or do whatever you want. And sometimes that makes things very easy for you. But also, what does giving into this darkness do to your personhood? They never really say it, but it's like kind of cool that, whenever you have that illithid choice, which is the like do what the mind flayer tells you to do choice. It's like, is there a check happening in the background that's like adding up right now that's eventually going to take me over? Do I want that to happen? Because your character has no reason not to necessarily, unless they want their independence. So I think it's really cool that it's like a value neutral evil that's in your body for the beginning of the game. Yeah. My character though, you want me to tell you about this person? Yeah. I'm forgetting their name off the top of my head. Actually, I remember their first name. I don't remember if I gave them a last name. It's Shayatin, which is Arabic for the devil. I think it's like the devil inside or something stupid like that. Without spoiling KOTOR, my KOTOR character's name translates to supposedly bad. or like problem maybe. Just because he can be good or evil in that game. And so I made this character. They are a half orc, non-binary person who has female genitals, because I don't know. I just like the idea of a half orc saying vulva. That's so funny to me. It made me laugh at like midnight when I was making my character. They have like a big tall mohawk, and their background is in performance. So I always play bards in D&D. Every bisexual person plays bards. This is like the most common thing ever. And I was like, what if I didn't play a bard? So I'm playing a sorcerer, which is really fun because they're kind of a glass cannon, but they are an easier glass cannon than like the like wizard or mage or whatever. You have a couple of more defensive spells. And I'm just building them out to be a long distance like status effect person mostly with a couple of beam abilities. And I'd say morally they are like chaotic neutral almost. I don't do they ask you to pick an alignment in this? I forget.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they do in Baldur's Gate 2, which I thought was weird because I was like, I just want to play my alignment. I don't want to pick it. I know in most D&D character sheets you pick it, but yeah. They like to pick the choice that causes the most trouble but not necessarily with the intent to hurt people. They want to avoid conflict, but they understand that conflict has to happen sometimes. And they are fascinated by people who navigate the world differently than others, who don't follow rules, which is why they have a sort of pet fascination with Asterion. I want to go down like story time at some point, and talk about like little funny moments or systemic parts. But before that, tell me about your character.
So, I also really like bards in Dungeons and Dragons, so I'm learning something about my sexuality right now, I guess. I generally just like charisma characters in RPGs, and so I like bards for that reason, and I also like sorcerers because they are charisma-based casters, so I'm also playing a sorcerer.
Whoa!
I am a tiefling sorcerer. Her name is Despina. Which is I like to name RPG characters after the names of cities in Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities. And
so
Despina is a city. The poem is about a city that looks different depending on whether you approach it from the desert or from the ocean. And Despina is like a wild magic sorcerer, and she has like heterochromia where there's one blinding white eye with like a white tattoo and looks all magic-y, and the other's kind of like a not magic-y eye. So there's sort of this like duality of whatever going on. And I was texting my sister about our characters, and then I sent her a picture of my like blue skin tiefling lady with white hair parted off to one side, and my sister goes, but why do our characters look like they could have been twins? And then she sends me a picture of her character who's a purple skinned drow with white hair parted to the other side. Whoa. So our characters like look really similar to each other, and we didn't coordinate at all. And then she drew a picture of the Spider-Man pointing meme, but it's our two characters pointing at each other.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, I'm gonna send you a picture of it right now.
Please
so
do.
You can see it.
That's really cute.
But the thing that I've been enjoying about playing Despina is in the early game in Act 1, when you come across this like grove run by druids, there's this tiefling refugee crisis happening. And because I'm a tiefling, the game is giving me a lot of tiefling specific dialogue options.
Right.
So I've been having fun playing that storyline from the perspective of like, I'm basically a neutral good character, but I have a particular desire to make sure that my tiefling kin are okay in this situation. And that's been kind of like a fun role-playing thing that I didn't expect, but the game has been giving me the dialogue options to be able to like lean into that version of the character, which has been cool.
This picture is so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had heard that the tiefling, specifically playing a tiefling druid, is like what everybody did in the early access period, because the early access client of this game or whatever only went up through Act 1, which concerns that like druid tiefling, that whole situation. So a lot of people played it because tiefling has the most interactions with that part. Tiefling, another thing that queer people tend to play, so you and I need to have a conversation later, probably, but it's okay. I like playing a half orc because D&D has a really big problem with race, like really bad. Like they've got a lot of flack for it, and every once in a while, I just get to play my race, and it's really funny that there are like a bunch of people, and I can talk to them normally, or I can say, half orc, what the fuck did you say to me, motherfucker? I'll break your bones in half. And they're like, oh my god, the lady's gonna kill us. I'm so scared. I can just instantly scare it's not an intimidation check, it's a racial check, so it's just like you pass it. And people instantly get so scared of me, and I'm like, this is good. This is correct.
That's funny.
So story time. I have a couple ones. I'm not very far in the game. I really have been wanting to play more of it, but
how many hours have you put into it?
Let me tell you. I
have about 5, and then I've done like 30 minutes on a Dark Urge character.
I have 4.6 hours, so we're really close to each other. But
okay, cool.
I just literally clicked on the Druid Grove area and then saved and stopped playing, so I'm probably right behind you.
Okay, cool.
The reason I got distracted was once I discovered jump, I realized you can go so many places in the forest. And I was like, I'm going to go somewhere dumb. I'm going to jump off of cliffs and like almost die and then heal and go run around. Let me see where I can go. And that's how I found the weird talking frog that killed me. But, which was hilarious. That's my funniest story.
Once I figured out you could jump, I went to like one of the piers in the beach area, and I just set up a wide shot with the pier and my character on the left-hand side, and I wanted to see if I could jump into the water, and you can, and you die. And it's
great.
like, okay, cool. This dumb game just let me do that. I guess I'll reload my save now.
And this is where it being a video game excuses the fact that it's kind of hard. Is they give you more tools that like just don't make sense playing real D&D, or we would really have to like have a creative DM. Like you've probably seen that viral clip of I think Matthew Mercer playing a stream of this, and he stacked like 15 barrels on top of each other and jumped up to get around a gigantic wall. And you can just do stuff like that because the game has a real physics engine. And the other one of those that happened to me was, that aforementioned church. I went through it the first time and I failed a bunch of checks when there were grave robbers outside, and I got into a fight with them and I lost. And I was like, okay, let's try again. And I half orc intimidated them. I got through, I broke in, then I killed them by my own decision. I like snuck down into this old church, completely robbed the grave robbers, felt like such a cool person. And I saw this like hole or like this cracked floor, and I was like, that's weird. I probably have to like throw something at that or whatever. Let me walk around and go down. I go down, I navigate, I come back up, and I'm clicking to go somewhere else, and I fall in the hole. And I'm exactly I realized I could have just jumped into like fallen in the hole, or I had so many other ways I could have approached this church. And I was like, damn, this is like really cool that this has nothing to do with anything. And they added like multiple different points of entry. Because there are other like holes like that where you can drop something into it. Like, oh, there's a cinder block above it, and if you throw something at the rope or the cinder block, it'll fall in and kill people. But I didn't do that. The other funny stuff I had happen was at the Goblin Camp. Did you get a chance to explore the Goblin Camp much?
A little bit. I like did the illithid thing to the front guard, and then I went to the windmill in the back, and I kept failing the checks to convince them to let the gnome down. So I walked away, and I'm going to come back later.
Yeah, I didn't find the gnome on the first time, but then I was reading and people were like, you got to go find the gnome. It's worth doing. But the first time I went in, I failed all of the checks and I had to rub shit on my face. And I don't recommend it because one, they like render it on your character the whole time. And two, every single person in there is like, ew, you smell. Ew, why are you so gross? Huh, idiot, you fell for the shit prank. So that's my narrative, dude. Was going to the Goblin Camp, failing a bunch of rolls, having shit on my face, and being like, fuck you guys, I'm leaving. And I get hit by 15 trapdoors and spike traps, fall into a pit, and then a frog kills me. I'm like, I just had the worst day of my life. And I'm going to reload the save. And that's, again, what I mean when I say, like, it's cool that it's a game. They let it be difficult. Is I can just reload. I don't have to, like, deal with that death happening. Because I party wiped. If that happened in D&D, we would be done.
Yeah, right.
But it lets you be a little bit more flexible, a little bit more silly, which is also how I approached the owl bear situation, which is also early in the game if you want to go there. You can come back to it. Basically, there's an owl bear with a really expensive, valuable baby egg behind it, and he just patrols it with his one like live child. And if you go there immediately, you have to either stealth around the owl bear or fight it. And it has so much health, and it jumps on you and attacks you every turn, so you shouldn't fight it. I spent 20 minutes getting Asterion to like sightline it like I was playing fucking Deus Ex. It's like, go around this rock, and then I get hit, and then combat initiates. Okay, reload. Try it. Go around this rock. No, get hit. Combat initiates. And then finally, I was like, what happens if I leave and do the Goblin Camp? And they were like, the guide I read was like, the goblins kill the owlbear. And I was like, well, that's sad. but also I'm still getting that egg when I come back.
That's funny.
So lots of, I mostly had like gameplay systemic ones, and then my big like story one. So have you interacted with Asterion much? Have you like had conversations with him about his whole deal?
A little bit, but not a ton.
I'm so glad I got this moment to happen, because I've, in the community, a lot of people are thirsting after Asterion. He's very sexy. He's a vampire. He's
a bit of a bad boy.
Definitely a bad boy. He loves it when you kill people. He's so turned on when you decide to kill people. But not in a like I'm like a sociopath way, but just like he's chaotic. And I brought him to the camp, and I long rested one day, and I had been hearing people say like, don't try to flirt with him, he doesn't like it. And my brain thought of like people in my real life who I have been interested in, and I tried too hard to flirt with them and how they rejected that. And I was like, I'm not gonna ask him anything. I'm gonna let him approach me and see what happens. And so I don't flirt with him. I talk to him. He's in combat with me. We have a nice little flirty kind of banter, but I'm not making advances. And then I go back to camp. I do a long rest. He wakes me up in the middle of the night, and he's like, hey, if you want me to stick around, I do need to feast. I'm really sorry. This is like a necessity for me. Do you mind if I bite you? And I was like, whoa. So thank you for asking. You got to promise me you're not going to go too far. And he was like, the best I can do is promise you. And I was like, oh my God, am I going to like kill my character or get turned right now? And this is going to go so badly. And it's this very intimate, very well animated sequence where he like climbs on top of you and like does the bite. And then right as the bite goes deep, you have a bunch of, this is so crazy. They have a bunch of choices to get him to stop. And they're all rolls. You have to roll to make him stop. So it's like persuasion roll. You should get off of me. Punch him in the face. Strength roll. Get the fuck off of me. Like that kind of thing. If you don't succeed in one of those, I don't know what happens. But I persuaded him, and I was like, it sounds like you're good. And he was like, oh, sorry, I kind of lost track of things. I am good, and thank you. That really meant a lot to me. And I was like, what would happen if I let Asterion just keep biting?
Whoa.
That's so scary. And that's like really early in the game. Like, what did I just roll out of? I feel like I avoided something so spooky, but it was so intimate too.
That's creepy.
So we're not dating, but we're having a bit of a tete-a-tete. And he has nibbled on my neck a little bit. It's fine. It's totally fine. I like that the next day he totally talks about it, and Shadowheart's like, you really let him do that? And she doesn't judge you. One of these games always have somebody who fucking judges you for being weird. I hate it. Carthonassi can suck my ass. He would never. He would talk about his wife for an hour. Dude does not know how to communicate problems to you. But like Shadowheart sees that, and she's like, he does. I understand. It happens to the best of us. And Shadowheart's like, that's weird, but it sounds like you had to do that. I respect it. And I got like a Shadowheart liked this. I was like, whoa, everyone likes this. Let's go. Those are my big ones. What funny stories do you have?
Let's see. You describing that made me think of I have only played the first 30 minutes of the Dark Urge character because I wanted to see what the very beginning looked like. And I kind of want to play that run like lagging behind my main run. So stuff is still fresh in my mind and I can see the different versions of it. And first of all, when you come in, the narrator basically says like, all you remember is your name, and you have an option to speak your own name. And then the narrator's like, the Dark Urge, that's all you know, that's your name. And it's like, whoa, shit. And then when you go in the next room and you can go see that little brain inside the guy. What did you do with that brain, by the way? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. The one that's in the guy, and it's like, do you stab it? Do you
let it be your friend?
I think I let it be my friend, and then it comes out, and then it becomes a party member, right?
Yeah.
That's what I did.
Does it dies in the crash? Is that what happens?
I think it just rejoins the rest of the Mind Flayers. It's just like, all right, good, I did my job, see ya, and then you don't talk to it. I think that's what happened.
Yeah. So the Dark Urge, there's a part where you can take the brain out of the skull, and everybody else, it's like, okay, you notice a moment where you could cripple this thing and hurt it in case it tries to attack you, and then you have the choice of either like you want to damage the brain or put it on the ground. But the Dark Urge has a choice where it's like poke a bunch of holes in it the way that there are holes in your memory. Like it's taking those same choices but doing the creepy version of it. And it's like, and then I saw, can I spoil one Dark Urge thing for you that's early?
Yeah, that's fine.
You found Gale?
Yes, I just found Gale last night. Fucking looks like Obi-Wan Kenobi.
So you know how he's like sticking his hand out of the portal?
Uh-huh.
When you're the Dark Urge, you can
break
chop his hand off.
Yeah, I just read that earlier on the wiki, actually. That's wild.
And then,
it's like,
and then you
like,
just don't get him. Then he's just not in the game anymore. It's like, whoa, that's something. So that's pretty nasty. Let's see.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. What else? There's like this random dialogue option that I had when I was talking to Gale that was specific, not just to being a sorcerer, because there are some sorcerer dialogue options, but that was specific to being a wild magic sorcerer. And I was like, whoa, there's a dialogue option that's subclass specific. And it was like just saying something chaotic, like, let's do it for fun. I don't remember the context. I think a couple of my favorite interactions. What?
I'm going to tell you in a sec. I just read something completely nuts.
Okay. I love Withers. Meeting Withers is really great. He basically asks you this question, like, what's the value of a life or something like that? And you have all these different choices depending on, there's like different things you can choose. And then I had one that was a tiefling option that was like, well, you know, people don't treat every life equally. And it's like, whoa, cool. I have this sort of, you know, perspective as a tiefling. Yeah. And then when you first come into the Druid Grove, there's this guy having an argument with a tiefling and he's really racist towards him. And you can tell that the tiefling's getting mad in response. And you can say something that's like, he's not worth it, man. Humans suck. And then he's kind of like, hey, thanks for holding me back there. I appreciate it. Which is pretty cool. And then there's this thing that I had to catch on to with this game where like, you expect to be able to ask every question in a dialogue exchange.
Right.
But sometimes the exchanges just end. And then you try to talk to the character again and they're like, we talked. I'm good. I'm done. And so there was this one woman who was a tiefling woman on the ledge of the Druid outpost. And you can talk to her and she's someone who could tell you who Halsin is, who's like the old Druid leader who's missing or something. But instead I had an option to talk to her and say, boy, sucks to be a tiefling, huh? And she's just kind of like, yeah, sure does. And then you can't ask her for information. And that was, I went that way and then I reloaded a previous save for different reasons and went back to her and asked her an informational question. And I got like 2 journal updates. And I was like, what a weird game that I can make this role-playing choice just for the fun of it that locks me off of information. It's like an actual, you're making actual decisions about how your character is interacting instead of doing the thing where you say a role-playing dialogue option, someone has an isolated response, and then you can be like, okay, I'm going to ask you 6 informational questions in a row real quick. Here we go.
Right.
Which I really like the verisimilitude of that. And also just kind of funny that you can miss stuff and not even realize that you're missing it because the dialogue just closes itself to you.
I love that too. And I think that's an example of like something where I don't feel bad playing it as a video game, but like sometimes when I would play like D&D and I would be like, hey, I made this choice and I killed this guy. And then at the end of the session, I'd ask our DM like, what did we miss? And he's like, oh, I wrote a whole town that you guys can't go to anymore. And I have to rewrite my prep. And I would like feel bad. And now it's like, it's all there. If I wanted to reload, I could go find it. But I don't feel like I'm worse for wear having not explored things the way the game laid them out.
Right. My favorite thing that I've done so far, I think, is I found an amulet that lets me speak to the dead. Ooh. And there's this whole thing where somebody on the battlements was killed in the goblin attack, and his friend gets really upset and goes to kill one of the goblins that's captured in the like the brig, essentially. And you can do that classic thing of like, watch her kill the goblin or step in front of the crossbow and say, no, you're better than this. Like, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Revenge hurts both of you. And I was playing the game next to Amanda, and I was like, what do you think I should do? And she was like, you know, let her shoot the goblin. I feel like the goblin should die. And I was kind of like, oh my gosh.
Whoa.
Who are you? Okay, I guess I will. And then I like reloaded the save because I felt bad about that. And then I did the whole thing of standing in front of it. No, don't do it. And then I reloaded the save and I remembered that I had this amulet to speak to the dead. So I spoke to the dead body of her friend who was killed by the goblins, and I was like, "Hey, who killed you?" And he's like, "The goblins. The goblins killed me." Okay, cool. So there's nothing else going on there. And then I followed her to the jail cell area, and I was like, "Yeah, hey, shoot the goblin." And then she did. And then as soon as she left, I spoke to the goblin's corpse, and I was like, "All right, so where are you from? Who's in charge? Are there any healers there?" And I like learned all of the information that I would have learned from like an annoying hostage negotiation or whatever, like persuasion check kind of thing. I just learned from doing my little spell and asking the dead body, which was just such a fun. It was just so fun that like works, you know?
Right. The developers thought of that and let you do that.
Yeah. So I that was kind of my favorite. Like, I really feel like I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons sort of moments. Yeah.
You let me use the systems at hand, you know?
Yeah.
I want to get right back into it, honestly.
Same.
I've heard a lot of things about where the game goes. I know that like probably Act 1 is going to be the most fleshed out because this is the act where you get your party members, and it's where the early access took place. So like from there, does the game maintain this level of quality and density? I don't know. But from what I've seen, it's still engaging, and I like where these characters can go gameplay wise at a higher level. I've heard that not lazy, that Shadowheart is kind of not great early on because she has terrible accuracy, but she's a good healer, and later on you can spec her into some really cool shit and make her like a death machine.
That's cool.
The thing that just made me gasp earlier is I shouldn't have looked at the list of potential party members, but I was trying to like get a list of them just so I could remember who we've seen so far, and we'll talk off the air. There's like some fucking people in this game.
Okay. Who do you have so far, and who's your favorite party member?
Yeah, this is great because actually one of our questions.
Let's do the listener questions. Let's do those.
Yeah, so doink, marry, kill your party members, or date, marry, kill if you don't want to be gross. That's from Arthur. I have Astarion, I have Gale, who I just got, I have Lae'zel, and I have Shadowheart.
Okay, I have the same 4.
So it would be too easy to say doink Astarion, so I'm gonna say doink Lae'zel because she's so weird. She's so I love weird girls. Like, I know like I'm gonna meet Karlach someday and everyone's like, she's so hot, she's a big flaming tiefling hottie, and it's like, yeah, whatever, fine. I'm not as easily swayed. I like people who are just a little bit fucked up, and all Lae'zel ever wants to talk about is her god and her people, and I'm like, you're weird, you're like a little freaky, and I think that's really fun. So I picked to doink or date Lae'zel. I would marry. I would actually marry. No, that's not a fair answer. I guess I'll marry Shadowheart. We would have a nice domestic partnership. My character is not pretty big on gender. When I went back to the camp and they wore like masculine like tight pants and like a dress shirt. I was like, how did the game know that I didn't want them to be a woman? That's so weird and good that they did that. And then I would kill Gale because he seems like he's the most... You called him a Greg, which is our term for very generic boys.
Yeah, he's a Greg.
What about you?
I have a question. Since you're playing a non-binary character, I noticed that there's a lot of dialogue options. I'm playing a female character, and so the character is being correctly gendered by dialogue options. Do characters in the game correctly gender non-binary characters?
It's not an option. It's a headcanon for me. I don't think I saw an option it was like male or female when I picked.
No, there is a non-binary option.
Is there? Did I not choose correctly? I'm gonna start the game over. Be right back.
It's what you can choose it. Yeah.
I imagine then that I haven't really been paying attention to the pronoun stuff, but I think I would imagine that they did do that because they also have written dialogue for everybody where they're all hit by what's her name, like Darla's evil laughter, that like one of the
Natasha's hideous laughter. That's my
Natasha's
favorite spell.
It's so funny, and they recorded dialogue of every voice actor laughing.
That's really hilarious. I love that.
You can make everybody do it. So I'm sure that they made that fine. And if I had the choice, I probably did it. And now I'm not remembering if I did it. So
okay. I just realized I also have Will in my party now. I just got Will. So
I'm about to meet him. Yeah. I saw him when I defended the camp.
I'll date Will. He seems cool, but I would marry Lae'zel. She feels like a real ride or die kind of person. And then kill everybody else.
Whoa. This is the thing. Everyone's like, come on, Alan Astarion. I've dated people who are like Asterion. It doesn't make for good dating, y'all. It's dangerous. It's toxic. We would probably go on a murder rampage. And not to say I've dated murderers, but it's like, you know what I mean. I know people like this. You got to be careful.
Yeah.
Moving on, some other listener questions. Nick asks if the game just lives up to the hype. You know, as a sequel to Baldur's Gate 2, one of the most well-beloved PC games of all time, and after 5 years of early access, do you feel like it lives up to the hype?
I didn't have a lot of hype going into it, to be honest, so it would be difficult for me to answer that question because I don't have a connection to the original games. I haven't been following it through early access. I think they kind of accomplished something important, which is they killed the hype in some respect. Because it's definitely not like the Cyberpunk situation where it was so hyped. I was aware of that game coming out and anxiously awaiting the release, and then it releases and it's like the Jurassic Park melodica meme almost of a game. But so I don't know. It's very good, and it feels to me exactly the way I felt when I first played Knights of the Old Republic, which is to say, super engaging. I'm like eagerly replaying the beginning of the game when I'm only a couple hours into it. It's also kind of janky, and it's turn-based combat, which you have opinions about. So that's my thoughts on it. I really love it, and I think it's incredible, and I also didn't have any expectations for it coming into it.
Yeah, I think go into it knowing that it's a D&D game.
Yeah.
If it fell below my expectations at all, it's that Larian is just really good at making video games, but they aren't so good at telling detailed and rich like in-universe stories. They have great lore. Obviously, you're working with the D&D universe. But I don't care that much about this quest to like figure out what the Mind Flayer is doing to me and how to get rid of it. Like at least not yet.
Super engaging yet, right?
That's my one thing. Like characters, great. Everybody seems really interesting and full of like interiority. Gameplay, you nailed it. You know, it could work a little bit of tweaking here and there. The rest system feels a little bit clunky, but it works. I think the difficulty's fair. It's fine. I like slipping on. I like it when I fall on grease and have to spend 10 turns falling down a hill because I got grease. That happened to me at the Goblin Camp, and I was so mad. Like I just got there, and then a Goblin threw grease at me, and I was like, "Fuck!" Not the Goblin Camp. Really when they attacked the front door where Will.
Yeah.
I like got hit by grease and spent 3 turns just like slipping, sliding. Like I was on double there.
That's hilarious.
So I think as a sequel to 2, it's more similar to Baldur's Gate 2 than you think. It's like a modern day one of those. And as like Larian's new big thing, I think it's great. No big complaints. I wish the story was a little bit more engaging, but I think maybe it'll get there.
I find the the like loot stuff really annoying. Like there's some quality of life, but you just can get encumbered easily, and there's a lot of junk, and it's
D&D would never do this. You know, like a real campaign would never be like, you have 6 plates and 5 forks and an apple. And
right.
It's like,
do you want to pick any of it up? So that's kind of, annoying. And I don't know. The other thing that's interesting about the D&D comparison is you also have to make sure that you're picking abilities that will have applications in this game, because I think it strongly favors area of effect, movement, like tactical abilities, and then other things like the more kind of socially oriented spells or situational things. I haven't used any stealth. I don't know how good the stealth system is. Like it doesn't cover, I think, the complete range of character experiences. So there's also kind of the grain of salt of what kind of character do you like to play, because I think some probably will adapt to this game better than others. I also know that Nick has a Steam Deck because we've talked about it, so I could speak about the Steam Deck experience a little bit.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it should, but it runs fine. It definitely feels like how I felt when I was a kid running PC games on a PC that had no business running those games. Where you can see some hitching in the frame rate and some weird texture stuff happening, and some like depth of field stuff is a little odd. But when you get in close up, and you're in the dialogues, it looks as good as it needs to. It looks pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
And the controls are basically intuitive. The one thing that's annoying is you need to pull up these radial menus to find and access your spells, which can get disorganized really quickly.
Right.
As opposed to on the PC, you have like trays of spells and abilities and stuff. But I think it's a surprisingly intuitive gameplay experience. And if you're willing to trade away some of the graphical stuff and know that you're looking at a version of the game that just doesn't look as good as it's supposed to look, but in exchange you get to play it literally wherever you want, I think it's worth that exchange. Like I'm able to play Baldur's Gate 3 on the subway, which is
That's
awesome.
so sick.
Yeah, it's really, really fun. So if you're willing to make that trade, I would highly recommend getting it. And also there's cloud save support. So if you have a Steam Deck and a PC that can run it, why not play it on both and have the saves between the two?
It does. They're leaning into all the modern technology. Even like streaming this game on Twitch, it has a plugin for Twitch that I think we should play with, where they let the listeners, the viewers, vote on every dialogue choice, which is pretty cool. It has a lot of that stuff. So they're leaning to the hooks, and I'm excited to see how it runs on console. Xbox and stuff when that comes out. That's great. Pat's question: are the food carrying equivalent of bags of holding called satchels of s'more? Yes. A flat yes.
Good.
And our last real question from Tryman X123: how do you feel about the decision to show the out of combat dice rolls? We talked about this a little bit. The die coming up on the screen and rolling in front of you is great. I find it really satisfying and tactile in a way that's like kind of nice. It does pull you out, but also, like you said, you're not in the universe, you're playing in the universe. The thing I don't like is when you're just walking around and rolls are happening. And like the other one I didn't mention was when I walked to the Goblin Camp. The first couple times I loaded that save, it kept saying Intel roll failed. And I was like, what did I not know? Like, what did I not? I'm annoyed. Like, I wish you told me what I didn't learn. And then I passed it once and nothing changed. And I was like, what is happening? There's just like invisible rolls that, as somebody who like, when I play D&D, I like to know what every roll is for. And in this game, they just do rolls sometimes for you to simplify things.
Yeah, I think I feel a little mixed about it because I do think it makes the game more exciting because you can see, as you would in Dungeons and Dragons, that there's a threshold for success and there's a chance of failure. And that chance of failure means that things could go left or something could get weird or whatever. But what that also does, like in a game like KOTOR, for example, you don't see the roll happen, and I think it might even just have like a persuasion check threshold.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's actually rolling persuasion checks necessarily so much as like adding
you
your
have
flat
3 or
score
more
to something, right? And so in that game, when you fail a persuasion check or succeed at it, you have this feeling of like, well, that's just kind of as good as I am at that skill at this point in the game, so it is how it is. But in this game, what I found myself falling into is the persuasion check would be rolled, and I would kind of be like, that's annoying. I want to reload my save so that I can succeed because I want to succeed at things in this way or whatever. And I've had to force myself in some scenarios to just say like accept the failure option. But the problem is a lot of the failure options in this game are not actually they're combat, that like lethal combat, or they shut you off from something interesting. Where as opposed to like failure being intriguing in its own right, Totally. So that's kind of a complaint I had about it. Because also at a D&D table, you can't reload your previous save. You just sort of accept, well, that didn't go our way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remembered another story thing that was really fun.
Oh, tell me it.
There are these like charlatan tiefling children in the druid camp. One of them is doing magic tricks for you, and like while the other one is trying to pick your pocket, basically. And the one that was talking to me did a sleight of hand trick to produce this ring, and I did a sleight of hand skill check to do a magic trick back where I disappeared the ring to be like, look, I could do this too, which was really fun. And then the kid was like, look, the ring is magic. Like when I flip this coin, it's going to come up the way you want it to. Again, just trying to like distract me and get me to pay attention to them. And they go, look, we'll call it. And I say tails. And they're like, look, it's tails. And then I had a dialogue option to be like, one coin flip doesn't prove anything. And they're like, all right, fine, I'll flip it again. And I asked them to reflip the coin like 7 times in a row. And there was a different version of the dialogue as this kid got progressively more and more annoyed with me for continuing to ask him to flip the coin. It was really fun. So
love that.
Yeah, that was probably my favorite role-playing interaction that I've had so far.
Just going back to that other thing you said about like the roles being shown in the game, it is a good and bad difference between this and something like KOTOR, and maybe that's why I'm enjoying the smoothness of a game like KOTOR right now. Is there's a plot and you follow it, and there are side quests and you can follow them, but you're always going towards the main plot. And in this, and that makes it feel like I'm playing a book club, right? Like I play like, okay, I played an hour of KOTOR, I got up to like Lower City Terrace. Great, I'm done for the day. I've made my progress. Whereas in Baldur's Gate, it's like, I'm just going to go in, I'm going to walk, like, what's going to happen on the stream? Like, I'm going to go in, I'm going to walk around, figure out what there is to do, and just, like, progress something. I don't feel like I'm going somewhere specific. I'm just, like, looking for, and that's what our characters are doing. Like, that's in line with the story, is, like, you're just trying to find a healer to fix your brain parasite. But because there's so much variety, it can feel overwhelming, whereas... yeah, what they do in KOTOR is there's a persuade check. Do you have high enough persuasion? Yes, you pass it. No, you don't pass it. No matter how many times you reload the save, you still don't pass it because you should have leveled more in persuasion. Those hard checks, again, stem from when the game came out and like the resources they had. But I kind of like it's like so simple. You hit the persuade button and it works. You hit it, you don't hit it, it doesn't work. Or you hit it and fail, it doesn't work. So I don't know. They both have their merit, is what I'm learning. And I think Larian did a really great job of translating D&D into their like combat heavy game design style.
Yeah, agreed.
And I want to play more of it. So
me too.
Before we stream it though, let's talk about first of all, like I guess any final thoughts? What are you looking forward to Baldur's Gate wise?
Yeah, I think I'm curious about what you said before of does this level of detail and intricacy and engagement hold up over a long period of time? Because as much as I was kind of dunking on Cyberpunk earlier, the first couple hours of the Cyberpunk main story has some really interesting set pieces and decision-making choices, and it's a pretty well-designed intro and first chapter of a story that then opens into a game that's just not that engaging. And I want to see, does this game kind of do the same thing, or does it have more gas in the tank? And I guess we'll find out. But if people want to hear more of our thoughts on it, I'd love to do a follow-up episode after a couple dozen more hours or whatever.
Yeah, I'm so glad I literally finished Diablo 4 the day before I started playing this, because I don't want to have 2 full PC RPGs ahead of me. And now this is the only game I'm really playing on PC, like for the sake of progressing in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's your pickle, Magellan.
Sure
I think it's time to pass the pickle to the listeners.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, you do it.
Well, it's your pickle. You're passing it.
So I'm going to pass my pickle to one of our listeners. We looked at a few suggestions in our Discord. We invite many more suggestions. And Stefan suggested a YouTube playlist on how to make a workbench. So we figured it was about time that we developed a new skill. We're going to check that out and discuss next week the process. As far as I'm aware, it is just the process for making a workbench. So check us out next week.
YouTuber Paul Sellers, he looks like a friendly dad of sorts. And these videos came out in 2017, and he's teaching how to make a workbench. So I think this is entirely sincere. I think we're like actually sincerely going to learn the basics of
how to
make a
workbench. Yeah.
And we're gonna get an hour-long conversation out of that. So look forward to it, please. Thank you, Stefan, for tossing your pickle into the ring. Ew, gross. The way I said that was gross. I'm sorry. Anyways, but John, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on another podcast that I do with my friend Justin called Super Smash Echoes, where we play video games related to the Super Smash Brothers franchise. Check it out, Super Smash Echoes. You can also listen to me here. You can also read some of my writing on Substack.com at notthatmagellan.substack.com. Alan, what about you?
Yum, sounds tasty. You can hear me on a couple other podcasts. I recently appeared on the scanlinemedia.com show Battle Crow, which is a show where my friends Nick and Six try to play a video game and do a podcast while playing a video game. We played BattleBit Remastered, which is sort of like Minecraft meets Battlefield. And that was super fun. That was a great episode. I'm also on the Garnet Wager with them, where every month we watch an episode of a Korean game show. And speaking of Baldur's Gate, we are also doing a tabletop campaign, and it is also a radio drama of sorts. I would say that's the elevator pitch for the Garnet Wager is game show TV podcast plus like live action. What is that called? What is it called when you braille play?
Actual play
podcast and radio drama all at once. Somehow it coheres. Creature Core, I'm also on there. Great show. Six and I just started continuing our Kingdom Hearts coverage. And lastly, you can hear me once every other month on Talking Marketing, a marketing podcast I host for AMA Boston, where I interview marketing people. And I just recorded an episode that was really good, so that should be coming out either September or October. Check out Talking Marketing wherever you listen to pods. Mitchell, do you want to take the plugs on this week?
Sure. You can get in touch with the show in a few different ways. You can email us at chatspod@gmail.com with any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, or pickles. You can also send us your thoughts on Baldur's Gate 3, and we'd be happy to read those thoughts on a future episode. You can, of course, support writers and actors who are striking by supporting the Entertainment Fund, which we would recommend that you do. You can find us on X at Chatzpod. Our account still exists over there if you still engage on that website. We are Chatz, a television podcast on YouTube, where you can find archives of our Twitch streams, like the one that we're about to do right now, as well as uploaded versions of these same episodes. If you prefer to listen to things on YouTube, they're there. Consider rating us on Apple Podcasts, your podcast catcher of choice. We would appreciate that. And also, please consider supporting us on Patreon, patreon.com/chatspod. $1 a month is very nice, and we would really appreciate that. $3 a month gets you access to twice monthly bonus content, and $5 a month gets you thanked right here at the end of every episode. We want to thank our $5 patrons: Arthur, Emrys, Jen, Justin, Kat, Lee, Marcus, May Louise, Michael, my mom, Nick and Pat of the Brothers in Infinite War, Noel, Six, and Stefan. Thank you, folks, for supporting the show. Mm-hmm. We also have a website, chatspod.com. @Camillustrator has created our podcast art, and we are eternally grateful to her for that. And now, the pickle within the pickle, the chatsums for the week. Alan, what's your chatsum?
Oh, why do you got to ask me the hard questions, dude? Sorry. I don't know what my chatsum is this week. Can you come back to me in 2 seconds?
Yes. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay, great. I've got a food-related chatsum for you. If you like to start your day with a breakfast sandwich, my girlfriend and I are using this new little contraption from Hamilton Beach. It's a breakfast sandwich maker, but it's the dual breakfast sandwich maker. So essentially, what it lets you do is you put your English muffin and your ingredients in the bottom compartment, and then you put the top compartment on it, you crack an egg in there, and plug the thing in, and the top tray cooks the egg. Once the egg is cooked, you kind of slide the tray out, and the egg plops on down on top of the rest of your sandwich. So we've been having these nice, quick, 5-minute little breakfast sandwich every morning for the past week or so. It's been really nice. It's been worth it because it's been keeping us from going and buying the breakfast sandwich, on the go at a Starbucks or a, place like that.
Once I learned how easy it is to make a breakfast sandwich at home, I was like, oh, I broke another fundamental system of capitalism. I don't.
Yeah.
I just have to keep my bagels stocked.
Are millennials ruining the breakfast sandwich industry?
Are millennials the new Riz King? I have a chat for you.
Okay, what is it?
I mentioned it pre-pod. Last night I fell asleep listening to one of my favorite older albums. Older, it's a decade old. John Bellion's Translations to Speakers is an underappreciated first release from him. He was featured on a lot of Logic stuff before this, and wrote a lot of songs at the time, but his first solo album, Translation Through Speakers, definitely not his best. I still think either the definition or the separation is, depending on the day of the week. No offense to Glory Sound Prep, but it's just not, it doesn't hit for me the same way. Or the Human Condition. You know what? Human Condition wins for best. But no, Translation to Speakers is like a good relaxation, sleepy album. Shout outs to Snow, which is a very corny song about liking a girl who likes anime. Life, which is a song about liking a girl who is depressed. While You Count Sheep, which is about liking a girl who's sleeping while you record the song. And Waves of Loneliness, which is about liking a girl who's lonely. JB really figured out his flow after this album, but it's just really charming and funny listening to it and being like, who is this? You're like not, you know how like sometimes we tease George Ezra for being too happy and that made his music worse after a certain point. It's kind of like that, where it's like I needed John to get into a breakup before his music got amazing. And that's mean, and I'm kind of kidding, but like it's fun. Translation to Speakers is still a fun album. It's well produced, so listen to that. Oh, that's all I got for you guys. You'll hear us again on Twitch tonight. If you're keeping up with the Chats people on social media, we'll promote it. And check out the archive, and we'll be back next week with more pickles. Thank you to Magellan for being the jar to my brine, because he keeps me together.
Oh, not the Asterion to your protagonist.
Ooh, because he loves to nibble on my neck. Sincerely. And thank you guys all very so much for listening to Chats in a Pickle. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Pickle. Bye-bye.
Bye.